let's get straight to it. How bad would no deal be? Because it seems to me, having reported on it all year, that this idea of no deal is becoming much more credible rather than just this mythical concept.
Well, I think it's important. The government recognizes parliamentarians, businesses, people across the country, and I think a number of businesses and people in Europe recognize as well that it's in everyone's interest to have, at a minimum, a transition period to the new relationship, and as comprehensive and open a trading and investment partnership between the UK and the EU 27 at the end of that transition. So it's in people's interests, and the government, those negotiating this, are trying to work towards a deal. So and
if it doesn't happen, what in your economic assessment, what happens
from our perspective? So let's bring it to the Bank of England. So what, and your listeners and people across the country, whether in Merseyside or in London or wherever, should know two things. First, we will do whatever we can to support the economy during the transition, whatever form of deal is struck, whether there's no deal or a very comprehensive deal. We'll support the economy in two ways. One, to keep inflation low and stable, so make sure prices don't move around too much. And secondly, to provide support for jobs and activity as much as possible. The second big thing we will do, though, is make sure the core of our financial system, the banks and building societies up and down this country, can withstand whatever shock might come with whatever type of deal we have. So there's two things.
Do you think we're in for a shock? I mean,
there's two things people shouldn't have to worry about. First, inflation being either too high or too low, and secondly, that the core of the financial system, the banks, the building societies, the insurance contracts they take out, they shouldn't have to worry about them. And it's our job to make sure that those are rock solid, and we will do that.
It's interesting because Jacob Rees-Mogg has said that, you know, you've consistently got it wrong over Brexit, that you've been talking it down. We haven't suffered as much as you thought, presumably, at this point. But is there, in your opinion, harder times to come?
Well, again, we went with the referendum. What the Bank of England did was to provide a tremendous amount of stimulus immediately after. We did two things. One is we did a number of things to keep the financial system going. That worked on the initial aftermath of the referendum. And then secondly, we cut interest rates and we purchased some assets and we provided a lot of stimulus. The combination of that, plus a much stronger global economy, and the confidence of British households have meant that we have done better. Now, we have not done as well as we would have done if, in the short term, if the vote had gone the other way. Okay. And we've moved, Ranvir, from being the strongest in the G7 to the slowest growing economy in the G7. That's part of this process of adjustment. Okay. It is a short-term issue. It's important, though. Yeah. It's a short-term issue, and I think what's important that people recognize, whatever happens in the negotiation, is we'll make sure inflation stays low, and secondly, we'll make sure the banks stay strong.
John McDonnell, the Shadow Chancellor, was on the programme half an hour ago or so. He says he meets you regularly, thinks you both share similar concerns over Brexit, but he says you need to think about the messages you're giving to the government over Brexit because they need to get their act together.
Well, I'll thank John for that advice. We have an open discussion with the government in private about the issues around Brexit. The first thing they want to know is, are we doing our job to keep inflation under control and keep the banks strong? Mm-hmm. Secondly, a series of issues around the potential end state, the end deal, the transition to that deal. We're doing everything we can to support the government. The government is responsible for negotiating this, and we'll continue to do whatever's necessary.
And on a completely different note, you're thinking of leaving, aren't you, your job by June 2019, a few months after.
Well, that is the time. That is the time of leaving. And actually, I extended my time in order to make sure I was here through the Brexit process and hand on to my successor.
By that point, we may have another Canadian here married to a Brit. Any tips for Meghan Markle?
No, I'll leave that to John McDonnell. He can provide her tips as well.
OK, all right. Thank you very much, Mark Carney. Nice to talk to you this morning.